Hello, this is Legium's podcast. Have you ever stopped to think about how much of what you believe about famous historical figures is, well, maybe more myth than reality? We tend to build up these almost larger-than-life images, especially around, the big creative geniuses. Today, we're diving deep into the life of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He's often called divine, maybe music history's biggest miracle, one of humanity's greatest composers for sure. But who was the actual person behind that glittering legend?
That's exactly what we're aiming for in this deep dive. We want to peel back all those layers, the popular ideas, the dramatic movie stories, even the outright fables. The goal is to get closer to the real Mozart, the genius behind those incredibly joyful melodies, yes, but also the guy who faced some really surprising challenges, fears, and honestly deep struggles. It's about sorting out the fake from the real in a life that had such a huge impact.
Yeah, and hopefully this deep dive gives you a kind of shortcut, a fresher way to see Mozart. Maybe some aha moments, some facts you didn't expect that might even change how you hear his music. So let's start unpacking that legend.
Okay, so when people think Mozart, the image that usually pops up is this cheerful, almost effortless child prodigy, right? Floating through life, bringing joy everywhere. His music definitely contributes to that feeling. It's often so light and bubbly. But what's the real story? Was his life actually that carefree?
That's the common picture, but the reality is quite a bit more complex and maybe even more moving because of it. I mean, for starters, his full name, Johannes Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart.
Whoa.
Right, 38 letters. And Theophilus, which means loved by God or grace of God, got turned into Amadeus in Latin. But it makes you think, doesn't it? How does someone who, in letters to his own father, talked about feeling fear and loneliness? How does that person create music that feels so full of joy, so easy? Was the music an escape? Or maybe it shows something deeper, about how art can come from struggle too. That really changes the perspective. Yeah. And he was born in Salzburg, which, you pointed out, was an independent archdiocese then, not really part of the main Habsburg Empire yet.
That detail matters, right? Because it meant his early life was under this specific church patronage, which could be pretty restrictive.
Exactly.
And here's something that really hits home about the times. He was the seventh child, but only he and his older sister, Nannerl, actually survived past infancy.
Mm-hmm.
That just screams economic hardship and terrifyingly high child mortality back then.
It really does. And you absolutely have to talk about his father, Leopold Mozart. He was critical. Leopold wasn't just a musician. He was Wolfgang's first teacher, probably his most important one, his manager, the real engine behind that early career.
Drew in.
Oh, incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
Determined. He even left his family's hometown to chase his music career in Salzburg. That tells you a lot about the kind of focus he passed on.
And that focus led to this, well, legendary childhood. Playing keyboard at 3, composing his own music by 5. It's hard to even imagine.
It's truly astounding. And Leopold, seeing this talent, basically took him and Nannerl on the road from when Wolfgang was just 6 years old, paraded them across Europe.
Yeah, for years. And some stories from that time are just wild. Like when he was 6, supposedly he met Marie Antoinette at the French court and just blurted out, "I will marry you."
Uh-huh. Did he really?
Well, it's a famous anecdote. And then there's his absolute pitch. He could apparently tell tiny differences in tuning. Like he once called out his friend's violin for being tuned a quarter tone too low.
Wow. Most people wouldn't hear that.
Exactly. Adults couldn't hear it. It shows this incredible innate ability.
But all that travel, even with the growing fame, it took a serious toll, didn't it? His health really suffered.
It absolutely did. Constant touring, bad conditions.
Yeah.
It led to illnesses, maybe even malnutrition. He was apparently quite frail physically. Definitely not the image of a carefree genius just floating along. So we're starting to see the real person emerging. But maybe the biggest gap between the myth and the man is around all the fake news that still swirls around him, especially about his education and, well, his death.
All right, let's tackle those. First, this idea that he was somehow uneducated or ignorant. I've heard that before.
It's completely wrong. Actually, he was quite learned. He spoke 5 languages.
5? Which ones?
Italian, Latin, French, German, and even some Greek.
Okay, so definitely not uneducated. And he wasn't just self-taught musically either, was he? He had proper lessons during those tours.
Yes, exactly. From some really big names like Padre Martini in Italy, this revered older scholar who apparently came out to greet the child prodigy personally, and Johann Christian Bach in London, J.S. Bach's youngest son.
So he was actively learning.
Absolutely. Those trips weren't just concerts. He was studying languages, philosophy, other subjects, often in the carriage between cities. People think he just slept, but no. He needed that knowledge for writing writing operas, for understanding the world, even for critiquing the aristocracy later on.
Okay, so the ignorant Mozart myth is busted. He was sharp, educated, maybe even a bit of a critic. But what about the really sensational stuff? The stories around his death, the Salieri poisoning thing from the movie, syphilis, conspiracies.
Yeah, those are persistent myths, mostly thanks to popular fiction and film. Salieri, syphilis from brothels, his wife Constance having an affair, the Freemasons taking revenge. None of it holds up to historical scrutiny.
So what did happen? What's the factual cause?
The evidence points strongly to typhus, or typhoid fever, probably contracted from eating contaminated food, maybe undercooked pork, while traveling.
Typhus.
Yes. His own doctor recorded the symptoms in detail. Very high fever, headaches, terrible abdominal pain, that distinctive rash, vomiting dark stuff, internal bleeding, and his body apparently turned dark after death. Grim details, but they fit typhus, not the other theories.
And the syphilis idea just doesn't track with his final months, does it?
Not at all. Syphilis, especially in its later stages, causes severe mental confusion, inability to concentrate, let alone compose complex music.
Right, but Mozart was composing like crazy right up to the end.
Exactly. 16 pieces during his final illness alone. And if you look at his surviving scores, there were remarkably few corrections compared to other composers. That's not the work of a mind clouded by disease.
It's interesting how those syphilis rumors popped up for other composers, too.
Yes, Schubert, Schumann, Beethoven, all falsely accused. We now know, for instance, Beethoven likely suffered from lead poisoning, probably from drinking wine stored in lead-lined vessels. It shows how difficult diagnosing diseases was back then. Typhus and syphilis could have similar early symptoms, like fever and aches. And without modern tests, confusion was easy, but the myths stuck.
Okay, another big one. The burial. The image is him being tossed into an unmarked pauper's grave, a ditch, because they were broke. Maybe Constanze wasted the money. It's such a sad picture.
It is sad, but it's also misleading. You have to look at the rules in Vienna at the time. Emperor Joseph II had put in place strict hygiene regulations because of epidemics.
Public health.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The rules required that common citizens who died from infectious diseases like typhus be buried in common graves outside the city walls, usually 5 to 20 bodies together. It wasn't about poverty or disrespect specifically towards Mozart. It was standard procedure for public safety.
And that's also why his family couldn't even go to the burial site.
Exactly. They were legally forbidden from following the coffin. Again, not out of indifference, but to prevent spreading the disease.
So his exact grave location is unknown because of these standard practices, not because he was treated like refuse.
Correct. There's a memorial for him now in the St. Mark's Cemetery, but the thrown in a ditch story is a dramatic exaggeration of a sadly typical 18th century public health burial for someone dying of an epidemic illness.
Understanding that context changes everything. Now let's shift gears a bit. Talk about his independent streak, his fight against the system, especially that clash with his patron in Salzburg, Archbishop Colloredo. That seems like a really key part of his story.
Oh, absolutely. Archbishop Colloredo was, by most accounts, pretty autocratic. He saw Mozart as, well, basically his employee, his property almost. He heavily restricted Mozart's ability to travel and accept outside work, cut his funding, treated him like a servant, not an esteemed artist.
And Mozart obviously chafed under that.
Terribly. He felt trapped, completely undervalued.
And it wasn't just the restrictions, right? There were specific humiliations. Being forced to eat with the cooks and valets.
Yes. Being ordered around by lower staff, being barred from a concert where the emperor was present while other musicians got paid well. It built and built. The frustration must have been immense for someone of his talent and, frankly, his ego. And it all came to a head in this incredibly dramatic confrontation. Mozart went to argue his case, ended up in a shouting match with Count Arco, who was Colloredo's main representative.
Yeah.
And then, according to Mozart's own letters, Count Arco literally kicked him in the backside, physically booted him out of the palace.
No way. Kicked him.
That's the account. Humiliating, yes, but maybe also the final push he needed.
Because right after that, June 8th, 1781, he did something radical for the time.
Totally radical. He declared himself a freelance musician in Vienna, just walked away from the patronage system that almost every composer relied on.
That took guts.
Immense courage. He essentially said, I won't be a servant anymore. He wrote things like, I am not a porter. He was carving out a new identity for the artist. But that freedom came with its own problems, especially financially. It's a real paradox. He actually earned a good income in Vienna.
Yeah, you mentioned 800 florins, like 4 times what other court composers got.
Right. A substantial amount. But he lived incredibly lavishly, loved fine clothes, entertaining, billiards. He borrowed money constantly, loaned it out freely, never seemed to manage it well.
So even when earning well, he was often in debt.
Constantly. It almost seemed like, as someone put it, bankruptcy was predetermined. No matter how much he made, he just couldn't handle money.
And alongside this financial roller coaster, he got involved in other things challenging the status quo, like Freemasonry.
Yes, that was important. Freemasonry back then was focused on Enlightenment ideals, human rights, reason, brotherhood, social reform. And those ideas definitely seeped into his later work, especially his operas. You can really see it. Think about The Marriage of Figaro in 1786. That wasn't just an opera, it was revolutionary.
Because it was based on that band play.
Exactly. A play banned because it was seen as dangerously critical of the aristocracy. The opera keeps that satirical edge, showing a clever servant outwitting his noble master. It was seen as scandalous, a precursor to the French Revolution.
And he chose to write that one himself, no commission.
That's right, a real statement. Then you have Don Giovanni exploring social hierarchies and morality. And The Magic Flute, his last big opera, was a Singspiel German opera with spoken dialogue aimed deliberately at ordinary people, not just the elite. It blended high art with popular styles, showing his commitment to making music accessible, and full of those Masonic themes of light versus darkness, wisdom, brotherhood.
Okay, so we've peeled back the myths, seen the struggles, the independence. Let's pull it together now. Why does Mozart still resonate so powerfully today? What makes his genius endure despite everything?
Well, first, just the sheer volume is mind-boggling. 626 known works composed in only 35 years.
That number is staggering. You mentioned it surpasses Lennon-McCartney.
In terms of sheer number of formally cataloged works, yes. It's an incredible output for such a short life.
And it wasn't just quantity, was it? It was the quality across everything.
Absolutely everything. Instrumental music, solo sonatas, chamber music like string quartets, concertos for piano, violin, horns, symphonies, and vocal music songs, massive choral works, religious pieces, and of course, the operas.
Not many composers excel in literally all those forms.
It's exceptionally rare to write masterpieces in every single genre with those perfect melodies, complex structures, but still have this broad popular appeal. That combination is uniquely Mozart. And how did he do it? The speed, the apparent ease. Witnesses said he could write down whole pieces, complex ones, almost without stopping, very few corrections.
Like a supercomputer, you said.
Kind of. It suggests this incredible mental capacity, this ability to hear it all perfectly in his head first. Pure genius, really.
There's that one anecdote about the Turkish march, the Rondo alla Turca. That always fascinated me.
Oh yeah, from the Piano Sonata No. 11. It's a great example of his mindset. He took rhythms and melodic ideas from the Janissary bands, the military bands of the Ottoman Turks.
Who were literally the enemy besieging Vienna around that time.
Exactly, but for Mozart, music was universal. He could find inspiration and beauty even in the sounds associated with an enemy force. It shows this belief that music transcends conflict. And maybe that universality is key to his lasting impact. His music isn't just stuck in concert halls. You hear it everywhere. Movies, commercials, ringtones.
Yeah, he's probably the classical composer most non-classical fans actually recognize.
Definitely. And because it's often so accessible, so immediately appealing, his music is a fantastic gateway for people new to classical music. It welcomes you in.
So when you think about it, all the fear he admitted to, the loneliness, the humiliations, the money, troubles the fact that he just kept creating this music. So much of it so joyful.
Yeah.
It's really quite something.
It really is.
It feels like a testament to his spirit, doesn't it? Maybe even a kind of musical perseverance.
Yeah.
Creating beauty despite the darkness. This has been fascinating. It feels like we've moved beyond that simple myth and found a much more complex, resilient, and honestly more interesting human being.
I think so too. And maybe the final thought for you listening is this. Knowing about his struggles, the depth of them, and knowing the courage he showed, like becoming freelance, does that change how you hear his music? Does understanding the real Mozart make those joyful melodies seem even more profound? What can his life, his actual life, teach us about finding our own way to create, maybe even find joy when things are tough?
That's definitely something to think about. So we encourage you to go listen to some Mozart, maybe something familiar or something new, but listen with this different perspective. Listen for the depth beneath the sparkle, the humanity within the genius.